Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Suraj. The topic I am presenting is folk theorems. So, to increase your curiosity about what we are going to learn today, I would like to start this presentation with a quote that if you cheat hate once, you lose cooperation forever. Not worth it. This is nothing but a grim trigger which we are gonna learn ahead in the presentation. So, coming to the story of folk theorems. It dates back to 1950s, where game theory has just been born. John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern have published their foundational work. John Nash is formalizing the concept of equilibrium, that is Nash equilibrium. The smartest mathematical minds of that generation are gathered at a place like Princeton and Rand Corporation, working on problems of strategy, conflict, and decision making. And something strange keeps happening every time. These people sit in a seminar, every time they pass each other in a hallway, every time one of them writes a paper that assumes some background result, the same idea keeps surfacing. That is, if you take a strategic game and repeat it, play it again and again between same players, cooperation becomes possible, even among purely selfish agents. This is nothing but the introduction to repeated games. That is, everyone treated is as obvious. Nobody wrote it down formally. It circulated the way rumors circulate, passed from one person to the next, assumed in arguments, referenced without proof, accepted as common knowledge in the tribe. It was folklore, academic folklore. When researchers finally sat down to formalize it, there was no dispute about naming rights. The idea never belonged to anyone in particular, so they called what it was already known as the folk theorem, a theorem of the people, by the people, for the people of game theory. Now, why does this exist? Here is something that should bother you. Game theory, one of the most rigorous, celebrated frameworks, is in all of the social science, made a prediction. A clean, precise, mathematical, airtight prediction. And the prediction was rational agents defect always whenever betrayal offers a higher payoff than cooperation. A rational agent betrays. That is what math says. You can observe this in Prisoner's Dilemma actually. Then economists looked up from their papers and looked at the world. Nations were honoring agreements, trade agreements, that no enforcement body could compel them to honor. Firms in the same industry were maintaining stable prices without signing a single piece of paper. Colleagues were building reputation across careers, returning favors, staying reliable over years. Communities were enforcing norms without police. Either every human being and every institution on the planet was being systematically irrational. Simultaneously, across culture, across centuries, or the theory was missing something. The theory was missing something. That missing is it was the modeling every interaction as if it happened once in a vacuum with no history or no future. This is like single one-shot gameplay, single time way to play. But for repeated games, a single transaction between strangers who will never meet again. But that is not how the world works. The world is full of ongoing relationships, repeated interactions between the same players, with memory, with consequences, and with futures that matter. Folk theorems were not invented out of intellectual curiosity. They were built to close a gap, a very embarrassing gap between what the theory said and what reality was doing. So the prerequisites here would be dominant strategy, that is the action that is always best for you, regardless of what the other player does. Two vendors on the same street, whatever price the other sets, undercutting wins more customers. Like there are two vendors, vendor A and vendor B. Vendor A has X amount of the same price for the same product, and vendor B has Y price for the same product. Where the customers would be attracted is if X is less than Y, the customers would be inclined towards the vendor A because the price is less. That is what it says. Undercutting wins with more customers. Second one is Nash equilibrium. When both players play their dominant strategy, neither can improve by switching away. Both vendors keep undercutting until prices hit rock bottom, stable but miserable. Nash equilibrium says that you can achieve equilibrium, but it cannot guarantee that all the players get the best outcome from it. Then comes the concept of repeated games. The same players interact not once but again and again. Here the memory also comes into play. and the consequence also matters. Two vendors share that street every day for years. Yesterday's price war has consequences today. The shadow of the future. I want you to think about an ongoing strategic interaction. Two businesses in the same market, two nations in the same region, two players in any game. They know they will keep playing in. In any single moment, defection looks attractive. Defection means you just like for your maximum output, you defect the other player. But that is only for this game, today's game, the current game. But if in the case of repeated games, the future plays also matters. So you shouldn't defect. But here is what the one-shot calculation ignores. That interaction was not ending. There were future rounds, a whole sequence of future payoffs that cooperation would have continued to produce. The moment you defect, you do not just win this round, you potentially end the cooperative relationship entirely. You trade a stream of future value for a one-time game. Game theorists call this as the shadow of future. The future reaches backward and changes what rational choice is right now. The longer the shadow, the meaning more rounds remain. The darker the shadow, meaning more you value the future rounds. The stronger the mathematical case for cooperating today. I want to be precise about something here. This is not a moral argument. I am not saying cooperation is virtuous. I am saying cooperation is arithmetic. The short-term gain from betrayal is small and happens once. The long-term cost, losing all future cooperations, is large and compounds across every remaining one. When you actually compute those quantities and compare them, cooperation wins, not because the agent is kind, because the agent can count. So, can pure self-interest produce cooperation? No. That we will look. Like yes, but with a condition. Okay, the folk theorem states is in any repeated game, if players are patient enough, almost any outcome that leaves every player at least as well as walking away can be sustained as a stable equilibrium. Let me explain it here. Repeated game. What it states is repetition is not optimal. The theorem does not work without it. Patient enough. Players must care about the future payoffs. How much they care is the discount factor. Almost any outcome, far better than the Nash equilibrium. The full range is the feasible set. At least as well as walking away, no one can be forced below what they would get by quitting. This is the individual rationality constraint. So the mechanism, how it actually works is the trigger strategies. The folk theorem needs a mechanism, something that actually produces cooperation in practice. That mechanism is a class of strategies called trigger strategies. The one which I talked in the first slide, Grimm trigger. It is regarding this. The logic of the trigger strategy is simple. Cooperate as long as the other player cooperates. The moment they defect, the trigger fires. Your behavior changes and the change in the punishment also. The first and the most extreme is Grimm trigger. The rule is, I will cooperate forever unconditionally until the moment you defect. Once you defect, I will punish you for every remaining round. No recovery, no forgiveness ever. This is the strategy described by the quote on the slide now. That it creates is, if your opponent believes the threat is credible, they will never defect because they know what it costs to them. The problem is fragility. One misread signal, one mistake, one round of accidental defection and the punishment begins permanently. Grimm trigger cannot distinguish between deliberate betrayal and noise. The second one is tit for tat. Rule is you cooperate on the round one, from then onwards mirror exactly what the other player did in the last round. They cooperated yesterday, means they cooperated in the last round, so you cooperate today in the current round. They defected the last round, you punish them today. They came back and cooperate, then forgive them immediately and return to cooperation. In 1980, Robert Axelrod ran a tournament. He invited game theorists from around the world to submit strategies for a repeated prisoner's dilemma. Strategies competed against each other in round-robin format. Dozens of entries came. Some extremely sophisticated conditional logic pattern recognition adapt behavior. Tit for tat won. It won the first tournament. Axelrod announced the result, explained why tit for tat won, invited submissions again, and again the tit for tat strategy won. It won because it has four properties simultaneously. It is nice. It never defects first. It is retaliatory. responds to the defection immediately, it is forgiving, recovers quickly from when the other player corrects itself. And it is transparent. Your partner always knows exactly what to expect from you. Here is the insight that ties this back to the folk theorem. In a well-functioning repeated game and with a credible trigger strategy, the punishment is almost never carried out. The threat alone changes behavior. The trigger exists to make defection irrational, not to punish it after the fact. The gun that is never fired is still doing its job, and that is precisely how cooperation is maintained. Now coming to the discount factor, I said that folk theorem applies when the players are patient enough. Now if I want to make that precise without an equation, delta is a number between 0 and 1. It is your valuation of a future payoff related to the same payoff received right now. If someone offers you a reward today versus the same reward next year, delta measures how much you discount the future version. If delta is nearly equal to 1, you value tomorrow exactly as much as today. Perfect patience. $1 a year from now is worth the same dollar from dollar to you today. If delta is somewhere around 0.9, that is less than 1, the future is slightly less valuable. You would need about $1.11 next year to feel equally as good as $1 today. If delta falls towards 0, the future barely registers. All that matters is the immediate payoff. You grab whatever you can and discount everything that comes later to near nothing. The folk theorem says, for any repeated game, there exists a threshold value, delta star. If your delta is above that threshold, cooperation is rational, equilibrium. Below it is defection dominance. What makes delta move in real situation is a firm with a 20-year market position has a high delta. The future is long and valuable. Reputation compounds, relationship compounds. A firm that is 3 months from insolvency has a very low delta. The future barely exists. So they cut every corner. A government that expects to govern for decades has a high delta, legacy, treaty relationships, and a long-term alliance. All that is what matters. An agent operating on a very short contract has a low delta. And in reinforcement learning, this is not a metaphor anymore. Gamma in RL is literally delta. Researchers have set gamma high, trained multi-agent systems and watched cooperative strategies emerge without programming them. Set gamma low and the agent defects. The theorem prediction is tunable parameter in an actual code base. That should be remarkable to anyone in this room. The example scenario. Two agents interact repeatedly across a long open-ended horizon. Both know this from the beginning. The choice is you contribute full effort and the other one is free ride. If both of them contribute, both benefit, best collective outcome is what they achieve. Both of them free ride, both suffer weak results. Mixed one, that is one free rides and the one contributes. Free rider gains short term, contributor absorbs the cost. One shot logic. What one shot logic says is free ride. But repeated game logic is what cooperate. The other agent remembers and responds. Now the question is there are two scenarios. The startup scenario where two early stage tech startups operate in the same city, hiring from the same small talent pool. For months, both respect an unspoken norm, neither poaches the other engineers. Then one morning, startup B hires away 3 of the startup A's best people. So according to you, what can be the startup A's moves? If anyone wants to answer. So what startup A can do is, again, there are two strategies, grim trigger. So you also hire people from startup B's pool, and you also then you can do is what, tit for tat. You hire 3 and then again you go back to your normal thing that you hire differently and you operate in a different circumstance. Then the scenario B is open source. A developer spends months building a critical open source library. Another party takes the code, strips attribution, ships it as their own product and profits. The original contributor finds this out. So what should the contributor do? Should he keep contributing to it, or shall he start from again, or should he file a complaint or something like that? That is what defects the other party. pilot control. That changes upon the scenario. So the types of folk theorems. The original folk theorem lived in a clean world. Every player could see every player's action perfectly. Every round. Perfect information, no noise, no ambiguity. That world is a useful abstraction. It is not a real world. So theorists kept pushing. They asked how much of this result survives when we make the assumptions more realistic. The answer across 4 decades of extension is most of it. But with more sophisticated strategies required at each step. The Nash folk theorem, it states, it establishes the benchmark, perfect observation, patient players. Patient player results cooperation across almost any individual rational outcome. It is a Nash equilibrium, beautiful and clean. Then comes the subgame perfect. Then coming to subgame perfect folk theorem, it adds one question that the original ignores. Are the threats actually believable? Grim trigger says cooperate, then punish forever. But punishing also hurts. It is called bluff. Would I really punish myself indefinitely just to punish you? A rational player anticipates this and might conclude the threat is hollow. The subgame perfect version demands that strategies be credible at every point in the game, not just on paper at the start. The same range of outcomes remain sustainable, but now you need strategies that are actually incentive capable at every decision node, not just global. Then coming to imperfect public monitoring folk theorem, it strips away the ability to see actions directly. Instead, everyone observes the same noisy public signal. Think of a marketplace. It moves, but you cannot tell if it is moved because your rival cheated or because your demand shifted. Everyone sees the same ambiguous outcome. Cooperation can still hold here, but punishment can no longer be triggered by certainty. It has to be probabilistic. It is triggered when signals look suspicious enough and calibrated carefully to avoid false punishment. Then coming to imperfect private monitoring, it is the hardest case and the closest to actual life. Each player observes their own private signal, and those signals are not the same across all players. You think I defected. I think you defected. We are both wrong, acting on our own private noise. Punishment spiral starts from nothing. Maintaining cooperation here requires agent to track and conclude. This is still an active research frontier, which is why it appears as a further it will appear on the further research slide in the next slides actually. The theorem did not shatter under pressure. It grew. Each extension made it messier and more true. Then coming to some real world applications, there are 3 domains. So the 3 applications I want to move through this quickly but precisely because each one demonstrates a different scale at which folk theorem operates. First is nuclear deterrence. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union each possessed the capability to annihilate the other. In one-shot game, the dominant strategy is to strike first, eliminate the threat before it eliminates you. Neither ever struck, nor over 70 years, no one ever struck it. Why? The game was not one-shot. Nations expect to exist for centuries. Delta is effectively won here. Both sides developed second strike capability, the ability to launch after absorbing a first strike, via submarines and dispersed missile systems. This made the Grim trigger threat credible. Strike and before your missiles land, the retaliation is already in the air. The punishment is total annihilation, credible, permanent and immediate. This is the folk theorem equilibrium at civilizational scale. 70 years of nuclear peace is not luck or goodwill or diplomacy. It is a Nash equilibrium sustained by Grim trigger with verified second strike capability. The bomb created peace not by being used but by making use as thinkable. Second is tactic collision in markets. Competing firms should, by textbook economics, undercut each other's price until profit reaches zero. This is the Nash equilibrium of the one-shot pricing here. Sorry. In many industries, price stays mysteriously stable and high without a single signed cartel agreement. Each firm watches market price as a shared public signal. If one firm secretly produces more and undercuts, the price falls and everyone sees it. The other firms respond by flooding the market. Price war. Everyone suffers it. Because firm planned to exist for years, delta is high, the punishment threat is credible. Tacit cooperation holds without any communication at all. This is why antitrust enforcement is so difficult. There is no conspiracy to find. There is no agreement to produce in court. There is only a group of rational agents doing what the folk theorem predicts rational agents will do in a repetitive way. How do you prosecute this? Third one is algorithm price collusion. Now remove the humans entirely. Two competing online retailers both deploy automated pricing algorithms. The algorithms are given one objective: maximize the revenue. No instruction to collude, no communication between the systems, no human decision making involved. Within days of both algorithms going live, price rises above competitive levels and stabilizes. What happened? Each algorithm updates rule, designed purely to maximize its own payoff, function as a trigger strategy by accident. The pricing game runs continuously with no terminal date. Delta is effectively infinite. The algorithm discovered tacit cooperation the way evolution discovers. Not through intent, but because it was the optimal response to the environment. A legal system built to prosecute human conspiracies was not designed for this. There is no intent, there is no agreement, there is no smoking gun. There is only game theory, operating at a machine speed. Then coming to limitations, this is important not because the theorem is weak, but because understanding its edges is part of understanding it properly. First, the multiplicity problem. The folk theorem proves that many outcomes are equilibria. In fact, it proves that almost any individually rational outcome qualifies. This is simultaneously its greatest power and its greatest weakness. It tells you cooperation is possible. It does not tell you which form of cooperation will actually emerge. Two players who both know the folk theorem might still fail to coordinate on the same equilibrium and end up in mutual defection, not because cooperation was impossible, but because they could not agree on which cooperative equilibrium to play. A theorem that is consistent with almost any outcome has limited predictive power. Explaining everything in a sense explains nothing. The second is rationality problem. The model requires perfect rationality, perfect memory, and infinite foresight. Real agents are none of these. They are emotional, they forget, they misread signals, they act on incomplete information. They get tired. Experimental economists have documented that repeatedly humans cooperate in one-shot games, where the folk says that they should not, because altruism, social norms, the emotions are real forces and humans defect in repeated games, where the theorem says cooperation is the equilibrium, because of anger, fear, noise and bounded competition. The theorem describes idealized agents. Real agents approximate them, sometimes closely, sometimes not at all. The third is coordination problem. Even if everyone knows that a cooperative problem exists and is rational, getting there requires coordination. Without communication, without shared experience, without a focal point, two players who both want to cooperate can still end up defecting. One of the mutual suspicions about the other player is going to do. Knowing the destination exists does not give you a map. This is particularly severe in the imperfect monitoring settings, where even understanding what just happened is difficult. Hold the theorem with appropriate respect. It is genuinely powerful result. It explains an enormous amount about why cooperation is stable in the world, and it has limits. Both things are true. Then the further research where the theorem is still being pushed is equilibrium selection, when a repeated game has many cooperative equilibria, which one do players actually reach? When do players actually reach? How do they coordinate without communication? What makes one outcome a natural focal point and another invisible? This is one of the oldest open problems in the game theory and remains genuinely unsolved. If you like questions that sit on the boundary of mathematics, psychology and philosophy, this is your work. Folk theorems with bounded rationality. The classical results assume perfect rational agents. What happens when agents learn, evolve and operate with limited memory? Behavioral game theory and evolutionary game theory are extending folk theorems, resulting into more realistic settings. The question is whether cooperation survives when you relax the assumptions that agents are calculating perfectly. Multi-agent reinforcement learning. Do RL agents trained in repeated game environment coverage the folk theorem equilibria? Under what conditions? What architectural choices and reward structures promote stable cooperation versus defection cycles? This is immediately actionable for a CS student and sits at the frontier of both AI research and economic theory. Algorithmic collusion and AI policy. When pricing algorithms they conclude, what is the legal status of that behavior? How should competition law be updated for a world where strategic agents are software? Who bears responsibility here? The deploying firm, the algorithms designer, no one. This is one of the most urgent policy questions in technology right now, and it is completely unresolved. Mechanism designed for cooperation. Can you engineer an institution, a platform or an incentive structure that selects cooperative equilibrium by design? Can you artificially extend the shadow of the future to make cooperation the natural focal point? This bridges game theory, computer science and public policy. Communication and cheap talk. When does allowing players to communicate before playing help them coordinate on cooperation? When does more information actually make things worse? Cheap talk theory, the study of costless communication in strategic settings. It is a rich, extensive of folk theorem results. These are the open doors, not closed chapters. If any one of them caught your attention, this is the beginning of a research direction. Okay, you can pursue it. Then the references I took is the foundational papers are from Friedman 1971 and Aumann and R. Shapley L. And the Vandenberg and Masken. The folk theorem is repeated. These are the papers which I have gone through, and the textbooks are this. If you want to read, you can read Axelrod's The Evolution of Cooperation and The Art of Strategy by Dixit. And Computational and AI Angle, this is the paper of Shoban, Y and Brown, Multi-Agent Systems, available free at massfoundations.org. That is everything. I would like to tell something about this actually. So let me tell you. There are two regions. The colors are not visible on the projector actually. This region from this right angle and this polygon quadrilateral. There are two regions actually. So what this repeated games and folk theorems tells is those red lines which you can see, the region in front of it, above it, is what the actual outcomes of the players in real world takes place. But action set is from those 5, 1 and the quadrilateral which is formed there. But most of the players tend to fall in that region rather than this region. That is just for theoretical concept, but practically no one falls in that region.